Like I said, I live in Southern California. It's fine for the most part. My accent is a problem for me out there. I found out there, this accent can fuck up any words. Like, it don't matter how smart the words might be.
Points. And if you look at the NASDAQ or the Dow Jones Industrials, there you see the Dow and the S&P, I should say, 500. The S&P down 224, NASDAQ down 715 points. All this despite what the President of the United States continues to say, which is that in the long term, things will turn out right. He is, the President, optimistic about how things will turn out.
The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal?
With us now, NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, CNBC correspondent Contessa Brewer, Jared Bernstein, who served as chair of the Council of Economic Advisors during the Biden administration, and Francisco Suarez, former Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade during the Obama administration. He is also chair of the Latinos and Society Advisory Board at the Aspen Institute. Contessa, what did we learn from this March jobs report? A lot higher than expected by most economists.
Right. We saw 226,000 jobs coming in when what was expected was about 140,000 jobs. So that seems like good news for the American workforce. However, we saw unemployment tick up by 0.1% from 4.1% to 4.2%. That's because there are more people in the labor force right now. Where did we see job gains? Let's take a look at this. We saw private education and health leading those job gains up by about 77,000 jobs. almost half of the 200,009 private sector jobs that were added. Trade and transport got a big boost. Leisure hospitality added 43,000 jobs, professional and business services. But on the other hand, we saw federal government losing 4,000 jobs. We'll expect that number to change, Jose, in April, even though state and local governments added jobs. But the job situation here is fluid and one that deserves attention, not just for March, which is, of course, we're facing the rearview mirror. That all happened before Trump announced these big widespread tariffs.
Yeah, and February and January numbers were also kind of, they saw
Revised,
them, they were lower than what expected. They were revised, right?
That's exactly right. So they were revised lower, which many jobs as was initially reported in that case.
And Contessa, later this hour, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is going to be speaking at a business conference. What are you going to be watching for?
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting whether he can calm the markets with his tone. What I don't think anybody wants to hear from him is the word transitory. We heard that about inflation a couple years ago, trying to emerge from the pandemic, and whether the tariff impact is transitory or not. I think that there will be a lot of questions about whether he can walk this tightrope between paying attention to the labor market, making sure, I mean, the risk of recession is now put at about 60% by JP Morgan Chase. Allianz chief economic advisor Mohammed Al-Arian said the risk of recession is uncomfortably high. That's a real concern for the markets. And yet, on the other hand, tariffs are in essence inflationary, by their very existence inflationary. The Fed has been working very hard to lower inflation, and that was what Donald Trump had campaigned on before the election, that he was going to reverse the inflation. He blamed that on Biden at the time. The fact of the matter is that is the Fed's job, to fight inflation. Can they do that and now factor in the expectation that they will lower interest rates? Typically what happens is that stimulates the economy, and it's one reason they hiked the rates is to bring down inflation. It's a tough job to be the Fed chairman these days.
It is indeed. Jared, I can't remember how many years you in front of the White House I asked, well, what's your view on the jobs report from the administration you were serving? What is your observation about this jobs report in an administration you're not serving?
This is a very solid jobs report. If it weren't for the tariffs and their impacts on markets and investment and looking around the corner at what this is going to mean for future months, we'd be happy with this jobs report. It's true that the pace of job gains, the underlying rate right now is about 150,000. That's the average over the past 3 months. Has come down some, but that's kind of come down from red hot to a comfortable level. If we were to get this number of job gains month after month, that would be enough to keep the unemployment rate from going up. We also saw wage gains that are going to be beating prices when that comes in, and that's been a formula for just continuing to push this economy forward. The problem is that the job market looks backwards and the markets look forwards. And it is hard to imagine that if Trump doesn't back down, and he's given every sign that he plans not only to back down, he plans to double and triple down, I very much expect that the damage that we're seeing to markets to bleed its way into the job market as well.
And Jared, I mean, Contessa was just talking about this, about JP Morgan now saying that there's up to a 60% chance of global recession. How do you see this?
Recession, but again, the reason we haven't seen a recession, even when folks like the ones you're naming very much predicted it, is because the job market has supported wage gains that have been beating inflation, and that supports consumer spending. Consumer spending is 70% of our economy. So a healthy labor market by itself signals ongoing growth that leads to more investor confidence, and that's been a very virtuous cycle that's driven this solid expansion forward. That's the expansion that the Trump administration inherited, but with all of this tariff, and I'd probably put the Doge in there too, they're squandering that inheritance.
Francisco, I want to just, as I ask you with your vast experience of, global markets and certainly, business communication between different countries, the president just on his Truth Social, and I'm just reading this now because it just is clearing the wires, this is what the president just said, just had a very productive call with Tolam, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, who told me that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they are able to make an agreement with the U.S. I thanked him on behalf of our country and said, I look forward to a meeting in the near future. Vietnam, one of the countries that the President of the United States levied some really harsh tariffs against. What do you see in this whole rearranging of the world economic order, as the Vice President referred to it as yesterday?
Well, the president has a number of objectives. One of them is, if you want to sell in the United States, make it in the United States. The challenge with that is that companies have established supply chains, and many of those supply chains are international in nature. And it's very hard to, in the short term and medium term, to adjust those supply chains. So while the goal is laudatory to try to increase jobs, particularly manufacturing jobs, this is challenging business. One of the things that businesses cannot stand is uncertainty, and they have a fair amount of it right now. Companies like Walmart might be able to, because of their buying power, be able to tell their suppliers that they need to absorb the cost of these tariffs. But small and medium-sized companies that depend on overseas products or overseas inputs for their manufacturing don't have that buying power. So it's going to be challenging for a lot of those companies.
And Francisco, what about the issue where the president calls it retaliatory tariffs, and they apparently are not that in many ways and through many means, because of just the disparity there are, and the mathematical equation that the president and his team arrived at these numbers through. But when you have a country like Vietnam saying, hey, I want to negotiate, I'm willing to go to zero tariffs that we've had on U.S. products, that would seem to be a successful way of the president negotiating these tariffs with countries, but you know, there are 200 plus countries that deal with the United States. Is this something that could be making an impact quicker than, you know, relocating businesses?
Well, one of the president's goals is clearly to create leverage in negotiations, and hearing that from a country like Vietnam is a sign that the president could very well have a successful negotiation with that country and perhaps others. My hope is that he and his team is able to go in and have conversations that can result in lower tariffs on their side as well as ours. So I think that's a positive sign, what you heard from the official from Vietnam.
Garrett, earlier today, Andrea Mitchell asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio about stock markets plummeting in the wake of the tariffs. Here's some of what he told Andrew.
Markets are crashing because markets are based on the stock value of companies who today are embedded in modes of production that are bad for the United States.
What does that tell us about the administration's messaging strategy here?
It tells me that it's all over the place, Jose, because the companies that are crashing are some of the biggest names in American commerce. I mean, he's trashing Apple, he's trashing Meta, he's trashing Walmart, he's trashing Amazon. I mean, the idea that you're suggesting that all of these companies are bad for America runs in the face of everything that conservatives have been saying about American business for as long as I've been paying attention to politics. And what you have right now is an administration that is trying to defend this policy in a myriad of different ways, some of them contradictory with each other. You've got administration officials who are out saying that this was a sick patient. The U.S. economy needed this surgery. That's the metaphor that the president and the vice president have been using, and that it will now recover. You've got some folks saying this is absolutely not a negotiation. These are permanent tariffs. You should come into this country and begin this manufacturing renaissance. And you've got the president and vice president, or you got the president out there saying, no, in fact, it is a negotiation, and making this deal with Vietnam, which is, by the way, striking and seems to me like a smart deal for the Vietnamese to make. They are getting slapped with huge tariffs in this retaliatory tariff plan here. The reason
Vietnamese are not buying American goods is not because their tariffs are so high. It's because they can't afford Teslas and Chevy Suburbans on the average salary that you would get in Vietnam. So the ratio here is bad, and getting rid of those tariffs, if it drops tariff rates back down for Vietnamese goods to be sold into the United States, which are things like clothes and shoes and toys, would make a lot of sense for them and would let the president declare victory at a time where the market signals are all pointing the wrong direction.
And so, Contessa, when will we be seeing major impacts on these tariffs on consumers?
Well, you're seeing it already because the auto tariffs went into effect last night at midnight. You're going to see the 10% across the board retaliatory tariffs. They're scheduled for midnight Saturday. And you're seeing the impact on international relations right now, as, for instance, French President Emmanuel Macron said to European investors, stop investing in the United States. Why would we do that right now? And on this point of bringing manufacturing back to the United States, may I just point out, and Jared knows this, the JOLT survey indicates for January and February that we have about 500,000 manufacturing jobs that are just open. They can't be filled. Why? We don't have the skilled labor force needed to do that. And why is that? In part, it's because Congress has failed to pass immigration reform that would give immigrants a path to come in and do these jobs. In part, it's because we send everybody to four-year colleges to study philosophy instead of skilled vocations, which we desperately need. But that's an issue that it takes complex solutions. It's not as simple as let's tariff countries around the world and then all of a sudden, boom, manufacturing is back in the United States.
Jared, also on Truth Social, the president just put out a statement saying this would be a good time for Jerome Powell to cut interest rates, stop playing around and cut interest rates. What kind of a message is that, and how much weight could that have?
I don't think that would have a lot of weight. When Jerome Powell says we're just going to be data-driven, keep our heads down and not get involved with politics, I very much believe him. I want to underscore something that I think's been coming up in our discussion so far, but I just want to amplify it. I mentioned that this administration inherited a strong economy. I'm not saying it was perfect, but the extent to which they've really damaged markets, investors, consumer outlook, business outlook, to the extent that we're seeing in markets today with a sell-off that is just outrageously negative. That is the biggest own goal kick I've ever seen in presidential politics, and I've been around a long time. A lot of times when you have these kinds of sell-offs or big economic shocks, they come from outside the country, or if it's a good thing, the president takes credit. If it's a bad thing, the president tries to blame somebody else, but it's not always correct. So here we have an absolutely clear, unequivocal linkage from actions of this president to the damage to an economy that was doing fine. There was no toxicity, there was no sick man. That was all just this alternative reality that they're creating, even as of this very morning, saying things are going well when we know from the markets that they're going badly. That is a very dangerous way to govern a $30 trillion economy. So I just can't say enough about how much they've just really squandered what they inherited here.
Garrett Haake, Contessa Brewer, Jared Bernstein, and Francisco Sanchez, thank you so very much. And we are awaiting remarks on the economy from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. We've been talking about that. We'll bring you any response he has to Trump's request just moments ago to cut interest rates. Plus, catastrophic. That's how one trade group leader describes Trump's tariff policy for American families. We'll tell you why. And in 90 seconds, it's being called unprecedented. The National Security Agency director and his deputy fired abruptly. Why a far-right activist is celebrating her influence on those firings. You're watching Jose Diaz-Balart Reports on MSNBC.
Tired of struggling with
or visit getcopperhead.com. So call 1-800-780-2477 or visit getcopperhead.com. Order now.
worried. I've spoken to some of them. These firings come as National Security Advisor at the White House, Mike Waltz, is facing serious scrutiny for his role in that so-called Signalgate scandal. What do these moves say about his standing in the White House right now?
I think that when you heard the story, and you all have told the story about this Laura Loomer going into the Oval Office, a kind of conspiracy theory person who lives in the internet world, and she goes in and Waltz is there but cannot defend the people whom he knows, whom he has vetted for these positions, against someone who has no idea about national security, no idea about what's at stake. And I think it really shows that he is quite weak in this, Wolf. And I just want to get back to this idea of NSA, if you'll allow me a minute. NSA is the most powerful part of our intelligence community, and maybe even, of the U.S. government. And the power of that, and who runs it, and what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do, can really affect any American's life. It's very, very serious.
Requests for comment. Joining us now, NBC News national security reporter Dan DeLuce and NBC News chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander. So Dan, what more do we know about why these career officials were fired and who replaced them?
Jose, that is a mystery right now. This came out of the blue very abruptly. There was absolutely no indication this was coming. And of course, it's also unprecedented. Usually, the head of the NSA, it's a military officer who holds that role, and they're overseeing this very powerful global electronic eavesdropping operation. And usually, that's a decision that the defense secretary and maybe the head of the CIA will consult with, and the president will sort of defer to them. So the question is, these are two people who have no political partisan background. These are career officials and officers. The deputy, Wendy Noble, has served in the NSA for decades. She's earned several decorations. She went to Russian and Arabic language programs. She was considered very capable, as was Jethro. So why is it that they're being removed? And this is after also the same far-right activist, Laura Loomer, demanded other people in the White House National Security Council be removed and terminated, and that happened. And she seems to be sort of celebrating their removal today in her post on social media and sort of suggesting they're taking credit for it. And I think it's really causing real dismay across the intelligence agencies. There's a fear among career officials that there's this arbitrary force at work here, where the criteria is relatively arbitrary. What does it mean that these people weren't loyal? There's no evidence that they somehow did anything disloyal.
And Dan, the term uses, are these positions, both these positions, ones that serve at the pleasure of the president, even though apparently the president in traditional times has required, or at least had more input from, as you were saying, the Secretary of Defense and others, but they are positions that are under the pleasure of the president?
Yes, these are not exactly. There's no legal question here about whether he has the authority to get rid of them. It's just more, why do you get rid of career officials who aren't partisan so abruptly, based on apparently the advice of a far-right influencer, by the way, who has promoted conspiracy theories about the September 11th attacks being somehow quoted inside job.
So, Peter, who is Laura Loomer, and what do we know about her potential role in this?
Well, Dan just detailed some of the conspiracy theories that Loomer has supported in the past. I think what you need to know first and foremost is that this conspiracy theorist has access to the Oval Office to see Donald Trump and spend enough time with him to be able to convince him to fire these individuals, and notably, according to one of our sources right now, doing so over the objections of the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, who was also in the Oval Office at the time. You just want to marinate in understanding that Loomer's word, the president effectively took over Mike Waltz's word, is the biggest takeaway here. As it relates to Loomer, the conspiracy theories, you see some of them, 9/11 terrorists, referring to them at one point as an inside job, saying that Haitian immigrants eat pets and other humans, like the president himself saying the 2020 election was stolen. You can go down the list. Casey DeSantis, Ron DeSantis' wife, saying that she exaggerated her breast cancer diagnosis here. So fundamentally, at the end of the day, the real question is not just about her background, but why Donald Trump, the president, would be listening to someone with her background when he has a national security advisor by his side who should be his leading voice on these issues. And frankly, fundamentally, a question about this administration, this White House's operations more broadly, about how individuals like Laura Loomer do get that office access. You'll remember in the past, John Kelly, who served before he and Donald Trump got into it, their relationship obviously frayed and dissolved since then, but he was trying to sort of stop individuals with these views from entering the Oval Office at will right now, but it appears that we've returned to sort of that position here in the West Wing.
And Peter, this once again underlines maybe the weakness of Michael Waltz right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Michael Waltz has a lot of folks who are frustrated with him with right now, certainly because of what happened related to that Signal group chat where he was the one who mistakenly added Jeffrey Goldberg, the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, to the conversation. Donald Trump, though, said that, he's a good man and said that he supports him. There have been other headlines about the use of Signal chats for other non-classified conversations as well. So there's obviously been a lot of criticism, and there are factions within this White House, some more than others, who don't support Waltz's role here. But again, I just go back to where we started, Jose, which is there's a difference between people thinking there's someone who would better serve the president as a national security advisor than there is people who propose that Laura Loomer should be the voice that the president is listened to on these matters.
Dan DeLuce and Peter Alexander, thank you so very much. Coming up soon, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is set to speak about the economy. We'll bring you any news on that. Plus, shoppers brace for hikes on everyday products from toilet paper, cereal, to wine and shoes, while one trade group leader says higher costs aren't the only problem. Watching Jose Diaz-Balart reports on MSNBC.
Trains. Trains that use the power of Dell AI and Intel, clearing the way so you arrive exactly where you belong.
Got an itchy throat from allergies? Claritin Liquid provides powerful all-day allergy relief in an instantly soothing liquid. For relief of even your most irritating symptoms, like an itchy throat. Claritin Liquid. Live Claritin Clear. And Doug.
We'll be back! E-News can't help people customize and save hundreds on car insurance with Liberty Mutual. You're just a flight listener.
He's a dreamer,
more with Russia than other companies that got hit with the tariffs.
So like countries like Fiji had less trade with us than Russia does. Russia still has 3.5 billion. There's a whole bunch of countries that have less trade. So if you were saying, well, it was de minimis trade, so that's why we didn't bother hitting Russia with tariffs.
Right. That's
not really true, because they did a lot of other countries that. By the way, apparently Russia sends us a lot of fertilizer. Some logic behind it. They are sending a whole load of crap to us in a couple of different ways. But it's also important to our farmers. So by the way, there are real potential reasons for excluding Russia from the list, to be fair. One is that he's threatening further tariffs in the peace negotiations. So he might want to reserve that sanctions and tariffs for that venue as opposed to this. Don't mix apples and oranges. And to be fair, he also only did 10% tariff on Iran, perhaps for similar reasons. Okay, now, fair is shown in America. Get a load of this. So we tell you all the time, Israel controls Trump and Biden, and we always give them endless checks and cheerleaders for their war crimes, etc. But in this case, we found an instance where Israel does not control us. Hey, so let's report that as well. But it also shows the absurdity of these tariffs, that they are not at all reciprocal. So a couple of days ago, Israel decided they were going to cancel all their tariffs.
They were tariffing American goods being imported into their country.
I mean, already that's like outrageous.
It is outrageous.
All that we've given you, $300 billion in in U.S. taxpayer money. But they had tariffs. But okay, but fair's fair. They took them off 2 days ago.
Right.
Like they thought, oh, well, number one, we don't want tariffs from America. Okay, and number two, we don't want Americans to realize we've been tariffing them the whole time. Anyways, but good move, and we'll take it, right? And so I thought for sure that Trump would be like, oh, did I leave Israel out? Oh my God. But he didn't. He actually put a 17% tariff on Israel. So, okay, give him credit for independence and a little bit of, actual control by America, America first. Again, fair show in America. Okay, but think about it, guys. If they have 0% tariffs, how can a 17% tariff on them be reciprocal? It's by definition not reciprocal, because they're using this cockamamie new formula that they came up with of dividing the trade deficit by imports, and then you come up with that number, and then you divide that by half.
Yeah, I don't care. I think that the tariff on Israeli-made goods is too low. I think we should increase it to 100%.
Yeah, look, I think that nobody should buy any goods from Israel as long as they're continuing the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, and I think that the whole world should do that. But in this case, it clearly highlights that it is not reciprocal tariffs. That's not what we're talking about here. This is an invention of Trump. That's why the numbers are so high. They're like, what? People don't have 67% tariff on us. If that had happened, there would be a giant issue decades ago, right? It's because they invented it out of whole cloth. And as I explained earlier, they're doing a giant nuke with these tariffs to justify the $6 trillion tax cut that's coming.
So let's take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the various reactions from Trump's friends on the right. Are they mainly supportive? Are they critical? You're going to find out when we come back.
And we are Detroit proud.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Price is Right. George Gray, who's next, please?
It's gonna be Archie Thompson. Come on down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right.
Archie, welcome to the show, man. Good luck to you. Next prize, please.
Not something that Paul could do right here in this conversation, but if he does address anything having to do with this, we will bring it to you. Meanwhile, let's take a look at how Wall Street is reacting this morning. And there you see it. The S&P is down 200 plus points. The Dow down 1,300 points. And the NASDAQ is down 630 points. All of this after the president unveiled sweeping tariffs on trading partners around the world. Just moments ago, by the way, Nintendo confirming they are delaying U.S. pre-orders for their gaming console Switch 2 as the company assesses the impact of these tariffs. And this morning, we're hearing from shoppers reacting to the tariffs as well. Joining us now from New York City is NBC's Yasmin Vasugian. Yasmin, good morning. You've spoken to some shoppers today. What did they have to say?
I have, yeah. They're down like the markets are today, Jose. Once again, the majority of folks that I've been speaking to, I've heard the word depressed over and over again from a lot of folks, worried about what is to come. Some folks unsure about what these tariffs mean, not only for prices going up, but for their own companies and the goods that they're going to be able to buy, and whether or not they're going to be able to keep their jobs, really, and other friends and family being able to keep their jobs. And then there's those folks that have confidence in President Trump and feel as if he's making this decision, he knows what he's doing. Jose, I'm in one of the shopping capitals here in Manhattan, in New York City, right outside of Macy's. There was a line of 100 folks outside Macy's this morning waiting for those doors to open at 10 a.m. Calvin Klein here, right, adorning the windows here of Macy's. The majority of the clothing made for Calvin Klein is made in China. We're going to see huge tariffs on China. The prices of those dresses in that window right now likely going up over the next couple of days. So folks wondering if they're going to walk into Macy's in a few days' time, and the dress that is now $100 will be $120, for instance. I think there's just so much worry about what is to come. Let's take a listen to some of the folks that I spoke to outside the store, Jose, and then we'll talk on the other side.
I mean, if this is what Trump believes will be best for the economy, then I'm all for it. I am unsure. Like, I think that tariffs have the ability to have a lot of drastic impacts in terms of our daily cost of living.
So again, it's this feeling of, especially from that last one, right, that we're unsure about what is to happen. But we are still hearing the sentiment from that first woman that if Trump is making this decision, if the president is making this decision, he knows what he's doing. So a variety of opinions here outside of Macy's, but nonetheless, obviously, worried about those prices going up, no matter who you are and what side of the aisle you're on, Jose.
Yasmin Osugian, thank you so very much. And let's go right to Chairman Jerome Powell, who is speaking in an economic forum, and apparently he is already addressing the issue of tariffs.
Those beyond just the next few years remain well anchored and consistent with our 2% inflation. We remain committed to returning inflation sustainably to our 2% objective. Turning to monetary policy, we face a highly uncertain outlook with elevated risks of both higher unemployment and higher inflation. The new administration is in the process of implementing substantial policy changes in 4 distinct areas: trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. Our monetary policy stance is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties we face as we gain a better understanding of the policy changes and their likely effects on the economy. It is not our role to comment on those policies. Rather, we make an assessment of their likely effects, observe the behavior of the economy, and set monetary policy in a way that best achieves our dual mandate goals. We have stressed that it will be very difficult to assess the likely economic effects of higher tariffs until there is greater certainty about the details, such as what will be tariffed, at what level, and for what duration, and the extent of any retaliation from our trading partners. While uncertainty remains elevated, it is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. The size and duration of these effects remains uncertain. While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent. Avoiding that outcome would depend on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored, on the size of the effects, and on how long it takes for them to pass through fully to prices. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored, and to make certain that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. We'll continue to carefully monitor the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We're well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. It is too soon to say what will be the appropriate path for monetary policy. We understand the benefits of a solid economy where workers can find jobs and inflation is low and predictable. We also understand that elevated levels of unemployment or inflation can be damaging and painful for communities, families, and businesses. That is why we at the Fed will continue to do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
And that is just moments ago, Jerome Powell at a business conference in Arlington, Virginia, speaking a little bit about some of the concerns that the Fed has and the objective of getting inflation to a 2% ideal spot. Now, earlier this hour, President Trump posted he spoke with Vietnam's top leader and that, quote, Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to 0 if they're able to make an agreement with the U.S. Now, Vietnam is now facing one of the highest tariffs, 46% tariff on its goods. In 2023, nearly a third of all footwear imports into the U.S. came from Vietnam, according to an industry trade group. Joining us now is Matt Priest, the president and CEO of Footwear.
up and get that second fucking crack hole. But right now the big guy's fine with the solo. I walk around in the summertime saying, how about this heat? I'm an Sometimes I park in handicapped spaces while handicapped people make handicapped faces. I'm Maybe I shouldn't be singing this song, ranting and raving and carrying on. Maybe they're right when they tell me I'm wrong. Cadillac Eldorado, hot fucking pink with whale skin hubcaps and all leather cow interior and big brown baby seal eyes for headlights. Yeah, and I'm gonna drive around that baby at 115 miles per hour, getting 1 mile per gallon, sucking down quarter pound of cheeseburgers from McDonald's in the old-fashioned non-biodegradable styrofoam containers. Yeah, and when I'm done sucking down those greaseball burgers, I'm gonna toss the styrofoam container right out the side, and there ain't a goddamn thing anybody can do about it. You know why? Because we got the bombs, that's why. Yeah, 2 words, nuclear fucking weapons, okay? Russia, Czechoslovakia, Romania, they can have all the democracy they want. They can have a big democracy cakewalk right through the middle of Tiananmen Square, and it won't make a lick of fucking difference because we got the bombs, okay? John Wayne's not dead, he's frozen, and as soon as we find a cure for cancer, we're gonna thaw out the Duke and he's gonna be pretty pissed off. You know why? You ever taken a cold shower? We'll multiply that by 15 million times. That's how pissed off the Duke's gonna be. I'm gonna get the Duke and John Cassavetes and Sam Peckinpah and a case of fucking whiskey. Hey, you know, you really are an asshole. Would you shut up and sing the song, Chris? I thought I was the asshole the whole time it was him. What an asshole. I'm an asshole. A-S-S-H-O-L-E. Everybody, A-S-S-H-O-L-E. I'm an asshole, and I'm proud of it. Ladies and gentlemen. I look at you like next to